Oh, it's cold in Petaluma this morning. Hello, good morning. It is the Nikki Medoro show. Nikki, of course, off in San Francisco on this Friday at her other job. So we'll keep the home fires burning here. We have some help. John Rothman will be along to talk politics and really talk about anything else, he said. Anything is fair game. I'll also talk to Tim Sika about movies. So that is coming up today. If I could trouble you, please, to click the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, to do that as well. I'd really, really appreciate it. All right. One of the things I wanted to talk about before we bring in John Rothman is this story about the Alaska Airlines plane with the door plug that blew out. Yeah, we have some more details now about exactly what happened there, and this from the man seated behind the hole, the person seated closest to where the blowout occurred, and it's a lot more intricate and detailed than we thought or than we had been told at the very beginning of this. Like, it looked like a couple phones blew out, maybe someone's shirt. Mm, it was apparently a little scarier than that. Trying to find the picture of the door plug that blew out. Man, I'll tell you. So, here's the story. I won't trouble you with the picture, but here's the story. This man was on this plane, which was headed to Southern California, and he was seated right behind the part of the fuselage that was blown off this jetliner. And he says that um, they were in the sky for about 20 minutes before this loud boom happened that led to a large door plug being torn from the plane, leaving a gaping hole at 16,000 feet that caused a suction and a freezing of air. Nobody was sitting right next to or in the seats right next to where this happened, but this man who was in the middle, directly behind that portion, says, I opened my eyes to a giant hole in the plane and I could see city lights. The first few seconds were just pure shock and confusion. He said, is this really happening? That's what he was thinking in his brain, in his mind. He said, seated next to him in the window seat, his friend had his socks, his shoes, and his cell phone sucked out of the hole of the jetliner. The suction was so strong, he said, it also lifted his friend's body above his seat and began to pull his legs toward the gaping hole. Whoa. I was like, this is a quote, what the heck is going on? My mind was all over the place. The kid, I saw half of his body sucked out of the airplane too, and his clothing and everything else. And I was like, oh my God. We didn't hear about half of a body being sucked out. And I don't know how, if half of your body is out of the plane, how you managed to regain it back into the plane. But okay. The pilot made made an emergency landing. Everyone survived. The man who the friend says was half sucked out of the plane suffered bruises and a sprained ankle. He said we couldn't even talk to each other. They were face to face, but they couldn't hear each other at all because it was so loud in the plane with the rush of air. He said I was scared to look around. We could hear the wind coming from the back of the plane. Um, Pretty much he said no damage after he's one of the people that lost a cell phone. He said pretty much no damage at all besides some dirt. It's pretty crazy. Now we know, and boy did they put this together fast, you guys. A class action lawsuit against Boeing already now being filed. Somebody moved with haste on this one. Mhm. Yeah, this class action lawsuit was filed yesterday in Washington state against Boeing on behalf of all the passengers aboard last week's flight. According to the lawsuit, the event physically injured some passengers and emotionally traumatized most, if not all, aboard. The violence of the event bruised the bodies of some, and passengers were shocked, terrorized, confused, and thrust into a waking nightmare, hoping they would live long enough to walk the earth again. I want that lawyer. That's awesome. So yeah, so Boeing now facing a class action suit on behalf of the passengers of that plane. All right, let's bring in our friend. He is a presidential historian, a political analyst, a friend of the show, and to all, John Rothman on the Nikki Medoro show, everybody. Oh, no, he's not in his chair. John Rothman is missing. There
No,
he is.
I'm not missing. It was the suction that got to me.
The suction, you were pulled out.
That's
Your
right.
legs dangling from the chair. No.
But for you,
Can you
I'm
imagine how
back.
scary? How scary was that?
Yeah.
Wow. I
Yeah,
can't even
it makes
imagine
you
being on a
wonder
plane.
if you do a lot of flying. But
Mhm.
then if you think about the percentages when you're flying, your odds are pretty good.
I know. It's still though. Wow. All right. Well, let's move on because I'm seeing the top story everywhere is the story about the UK and the US doing these airstrikes against the Houthi militants in Yemen in a direct response to continued attacks on ships in the Red Sea. So I thought maybe I would ask you, and maybe everyone else knows, but I thought it would be helpful to start this conversation with a primer on who are the Houthis?
They are radical Islamic extremists on in Yemen, who Saudi Arabia has been fighting now for some time. They're a real danger, but understand what the Houthis are doing is
Oh,
the same as Hamas.
Is it Houthi or Houthi?
Houthi.
Houthi. Okay.
The Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, they're all bankrolled, supported, supplied by Iran. So the real issue here is the rise of radical Islam as now inspired by Iran. And frankly, we responded quickly. But think about this, Kim. Why did we respond? The economic threat. 15% of the world's commerce on the sea passes through the Red Sea. We responded on an economic basis, and we did it brilliantly, hard-hitting, no question. Think about the Israelis. They're not being threatened economically. They were being threatened by terrorism in their own country. Yeah. And they responded quickly. And we gave warning, that is, the United States gave warning, and so did the Israelis give warning. But radical Islam is not deterred by warnings. One of the most interesting things is that Mitch McConnell immediately issued a statement as the leader of the Republicans in the United States Senate, supporting the action of the United States and the United Kingdom. But it's very interesting to note, the one criticism was, why didn't they do it earlier? That was McConnell's point. What took you so long? And in Israel, they're all asking the question, why isn't the world reacting when we are threatened physically with annihilation? Rockets, by the way, are still flying into Israel from Hamas. And yet the world reacts quickly in the case of the Red Sea, because the economic issues are so profound, so great. But nonetheless, it is a double standard that should be noted and should be understood.
Why are the Houthis attacking ships in the Red Sea?
Because
and do they do it because they know it's going to bring this kind of response?
No, they're trying to support Hamas. They believe in Israel's destruction. Therefore, anything that leads to Israel's destruction or harms Israel, they support. Originally, interestingly enough, their target were ships going into Eilat, into the major port of Israel. But now they're indiscriminately hitting any Western ships or any ships that are in the Red Sea. So it's a very interesting development. But, you know, I wrote a book called Icon of Evil, Hitler's Mufti and the Rise of Radical Islam. I was the co-authored with David Dallin, my good friend. And this book came out in 2008, published by Random House, and then issued as a paperback by Transaction. All I can tell you is everything we said back in 2008 is happening now. And it's a shame that the world doesn't quite know how to respond. Look, the United Nations, both the Security Council and the General Assembly, have yet to condemn Hamas for what happened on October 7th. And I want to point out there's a trial going on now where the Israelis are being accused of genocide. I want everyone to understand very clearly, first of all, genocide is the mass destruction of people. If the Israelis wanted to destroy people, believe me, they could have. They could have destroyed the Palestinians. They had the capability to do it. They haven't. And number two, and most concerning to me, is that the world's silence. They're willing to stand up and condemn the Israelis, or at least that's what the World Court is. But nobody's bringing a suit against the United States of America or Great Britain for acting in their interests. And the threat of radical Islam is one that needs to be understood clearly. We're not talking about Islam, a great world religion. Islam is a great world religion which deserves all the respect of the people of the world. It's people who are distorting the meaning of Islam and taking violent action. The United States still remembers what happened to us on September the 11th. We remember, and yet it's very hard to come to grips with condemning a radical Islamic group. It's easier to go after a nation. By the way, one of the reasons why the World Court doesn't go after Hamas is because they're not a nation. They're a terrorist group, or if you will, an organization. So it's a very complex situation. Let me just quickly add, the President of the United States gave an order. The action was quick. It was decisive. And if you heard this morning, the Houthis are saying, this is just the beginning. We're going to hit you wherever you are. So I have a feeling this is going to unfold in a far more dramatic fashion.
Well, that's disconcerting. I was reading this morning that the Houthis they think they're trained by the folks in Iran.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And supplied. It's not just the training. It's the supplies, the long-range missiles, the weapons that are being provided are all being provided by Iran.
But they're in Yemen. So are the Houthis connected to the government in Yemen?
They're opposed to the government in Yemen.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why there has been a civil war in Yemen is between the government and the Houthis. And it's a very interesting dynamic. And I don't know how we resolve it. That is to say, the motivation is so perverse in its negativity. And it's one of the tragedies of radical Islam. I don't know how you conquer an idea, how you defeat an idea. Yeah. I said the same thing, by the way, in relation to the Israelis and Hamas. The Israelis are fully justified, in my judgment, in doing what they're doing, although I wish so many innocent people weren't being killed. That's obvious to all of us. But when you are a terrorist organization and you shield yourself in steel and concrete tunnels underneath civilian areas, schools, hospitals, mosques, it becomes a question, how do you root them out? In this case, the United States is relatively lucky. We were able to hit, along with the Brits, supply areas, supply depots. But let me assure you that if we are attacked, or if, as the Houthis are saying, they're going to hit the United States and Great Britain and Western powers, by the way, including Denmark, then we are faced with the same paradox that the Israelis are faced with. The difference is, for Israel, it's an existential threat. Their very survival. For us, it's an economic threat, right, and coupled with a few terrorist attacks, which hopefully we can handle.
I was reading about the Houthis this morning, and from what I understand, their whole movement is about being supportive of God. That's another
radical Islam. Exactly.
Yeah. And they're part of this civil war that has been going on for more than a decade in Yemen, that I guess we just take for granted that this is even happening, that there's this group of people that are fighting back and forth for control of this country. Is the United States coming, I don't know, a little bit behind this? I mean, do we want to get involved in this decades-long war with these people?
Well, we are. We supply Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has been supplying the weapons to the government of Yemen to fight the Houthis. So we've been involved indirectly in this battle all the way along. And we have not discouraged the Saudis from being directly engaged. Now, the Saudis have their own problems. That is why they're sort of taking a hands-off attitude to what's going on. We're going to fight the battle that the Saudis wanted to fight themselves. They don't have to get their hands dirty, if you will. We are going to do it for them, the United States, Great Britain, and our allies. And that's to keep economic interests alive. That is to keep that waterway open.
I also was reading that the Houthis and Hamas, and also Hezbollah, they call themselves the axis of resistance.
Correct.
Are these the only three? Are there more that we need to worry about? More
certainly.
Yeah.
The Islamic Jihad, various movements that exist in Iraq and in Syria. This is a phenomenon that we really first came to grips with on September the 11th, when the United States was hit. And I can only tell you, I don't see a solution, because when it comes to religion and people's belief that they are absolutely right in what they're doing, How do you stop them? And one of the problems, people talk about the question of a political solution in the Middle East. A political solution requires politics. Why do you think Yasser Arafat finally signed an agreement with the Israelis? Why do you think he did that? Because he was being threatened by Hamas. Because he understood, Arafat understood, that if elections were held, he would lose and Hamas would win. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that was the guiding principle for Yasser Arafat. And the same thing applied to Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres. They understood that if the PLO were destroyed, they'd have to confront Hamas. And they knew that Hamas would never sign an agreement with the Israelis, would never accept because of religious fanaticism. And now we see it manifest in Gaza, where religious fanaticism fueled the attack on Israel. That, by the way, involved rape, involved beheading, involved a massacre, murder, and yet it's all done, and I hate to say this, it's done in the name of God.
Yeah.
And that's a serious problem. And by the way, that's not exclusive to radical Islam. Remember, during the Crusades, Christians did very much the same thing.
Absolutely.
And that applies if you take Eastern religions as well. It's a very complex business the minute you involve God.
It's true. It's very true. I have concerns, though, when the United States says, well, this is an effort to squash this type of rebellion or violence against the United States and against these ships. And I hear you say this could likely is the beginning of a larger escalation of this conflict, that I worry what we've gotten ourselves into here. Because when you start bringing God into it and religion into it, as you just mentioned, there's really, there's no way to convince anybody or get out of a fight like that, right?
You're correct.
And so then you're entering into this feud with people that it's never going to end.
Thank you, Kim. That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. It doesn't end. And if you listen to what's going on at the World Court, this question of Israeli genocide, you hear the hypocrisy. It runs all the way through their arguments. We know what genocide is. We understand that if you want to exterminate a people, well, the Israelis aren't out to exterminate anybody. But let me point out to you that radical Islam is out to exterminate their opponents. That's what they do. But how do you label a non-governmental force as Hamas or Islamic Jihad or the Houthis or Hezbollah are?
Mm-hmm.
How do you fight them? I mean, that's the problem. And I don't have an answer for it. I can only tell you it is an ongoing issue that goes back before September 11th. It goes back in the biography that we wrote of Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. You can trace it really in terms of its modern manifestations to the Mufti and the Muslim Brotherhood and the rise of radical Islam, which, by the way, moderate Arab leaders or so-called moderate Arab leaders have tried to defeat. Remember that Nasser of Egypt, who forged the first Arab nationalist movement of great scope, waged a war against the Muslim Brotherhood. And remember who killed Anwar Sadat? The Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, these facts cannot be disputed. But, of course, they are being disputed right now with Israel being accused of genocide. So what can you do?
Vilma writes, I hate America fighting wars for other countries. In this case, though,
we're not fighting a war for another country. This is us.
Yeah.
September 11th was about the United States of America. What's happening in the Red Sea was about and is about the United States of America. The Houthis have declared war on us. Now, they don't have the capability that Osama bin Laden was able to develop. But may I make one other comment that is very negative and appalling? Believe me, what the Israelis have done in Gaza is going to generate even more extremism.
Right.
And that is going to create huge problems in the years to come.
Why don't
20
they think,
years, 30 years from now.
Why don't they, and I know you'll talk about, Israel has the right to defend itself, but why don't they look ahead and think, if we do this, if we bomb the holy heck out of this place, it's going to, and the people that are left behind, the survivors of those we have killed, are going to be really angry, and they're going to come after us. And then again, we perpetuate this cycle.
Because they come after them anyway.
Oh.
I mean, do you understand the opposition to Israel, to Jews, to the West, is part of the body of radical Islam. The fact that Israel exists is the provocation. The fact that the United States exists is part of the provocation. It's not our actions, other than the fact that we exist. And that, I know it's hard to grasp. It's not an easy concept. I wrestle with it every single day. And we are wrestling with it right here. Look, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors passed a resolution supporting a ceasefire. Mm-hmm. Well, everybody's in favor of a ceasefire in theory, but the minute a resolution, part of that resolution became condemning Hamas for what it did on October 7th, well, that wasn't acceptable. And the member of the Board of Supervisors who introduced that resolution, not only was he slapped down, but now he's been removed as chairman of the Rules Committee at the Board of Supervisors. I mean, I can't explain to you or demonstrate to you more than in these examples how tragic it is. And I refuse to give up. I refuse to give up hope. I believe there are people who will try to achieve some sort of compromise. Mm-hmm. But remember, the people who lived on the border with Gaza were all peaceniks. They all were in favor of some sort of peace and reconciliation. And who gets killed? They do. So
many different opinions coming up in the chat, and I thought maybe I would read a couple of them. Mike in Napa. Good morning, Mike. He says, Israel is taking the West Bank away from the Palestinians by any way possible. Then we have Brian.
Wait, 1 sec. It's not true. If the Israelis wanted to take the West Bank, they would have annexed it. They didn't. Instead, Palestinians were given self-governance. The problem is that those Palestinians have now used the West Bank as a vehicle to attack Israel. And the great fear in Israel is not of a Palestinian state per se, but that a Palestinian state ruled by Hamas. And I'm sure the listener would concede if elections were held on the West Bank, Hamas would win. And if that's the case, why would Israel allow the Hamas to have any more ability to attack Israel? I mean, it's a very pragmatic. I'm in favor of a Palestinian state. I have been for years. I've been outspoken in my favor. But Hamas was given the opportunity in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority was given the opportunity in Gaza. But their concern is the fact that Israel exists. That's the sin. Go ahead.
Brian writes, it's horrendous that the UN has not condemned Hamas for the terrorist attacks into Israel, you've mentioned this before, and the continued rockets and the use of innocent Palestinians as human shields.
You're right. And it's the hypocrisy that we now face. It goes back to 1975 when the United Nations passed a resolution equating Zionism with racism. And if you remember, our ambassador to the United Nations, Pat Moynihan at the time, gave a brilliant speech and tore up the resolution. Yeah. Well, it took until December 16th of 1991 for that resolution to be rescinded, the only time the United Nations has ever rescinded a resolution. What can I tell you? There is hypocrisy in the world. And there is another issue. You know, the great philosopher here in San Francisco, longshoreman Eric Hoffer, who we all know from his brilliant writings, once said, the problem with the world is they expect the Jews to be the only real Christians in the world. Well, Jews know that when they turn the other cheek, they get killed. Mm-hmm. That's why they're not turning the other cheek. Talk about genocide. What provoked the International Genocide Agreement, which the United States finally signed and which I advocated for years? Because of the Holocaust, the ultimate genocide that became the picture of what genocide really is. So, you know, the Israelis live in that shadow as well.
Sam writes, and Sam sends me, good morning, Sam. Sam sends me a lot of news that is very contraindicated to what the things that you say. So you guys you're diametrically opposed from the get-go.
I'm delighted, Sam. Keep it up.
And you know what the cool thing is, you know, I adore you. Sam, also a very cool guy. Really like him a lot. No one is more extreme than the Israeli government and IDF. History, he says, cannot be denied.
Well, let me tell you, if fighting for your existence is extreme, that's probably a good thing. If rebuffing the Arab attempts to invade and destroy Israel in 1948 and 1967 is extreme, so be it. I would rather have Jews fighting back than you or anybody else mourning dead Jews again. Those days are gone.
Okay. I would love to have a luncheon with you and Sam and just listen to you respectfully disagree and go back and forth. Because if you guys could come to the same page, then I would actually have hope that we could resolve something.
May I tell you, it's not that Sam is wrong from his point of view. And I want Sam to understand this. Sam has an ideology which says to him that Israel is a negative force in the world. And I'm not going to put words in Sam's mouth, but I assume he'd be just as happy if Israel as a nation had never been existing. I take a different view. I have no grudge against the Palestinians. I have no grudge against the Arabs. I simply want Israel to be able to live freely. And when people chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and maybe Sam can tell us whether he agrees with that slogan, it means the destruction of Israel. Why should a nation agree to its destruction? The Palestinians have a right to self-determination. They have a right to a nation, but not at the expense of Israel's right to exist. And I would remind you that the United Nations in 1947 divided the baby. They created a Jewish state, or voted to create a Jewish state, and to create an Arab state in Palestine. And the Jews accepted the concept. The Arabs rejected it. And part of the problem is, with those who oppose Israel, there seems to be no willingness to compromise. Same thing applies with the United States. The identification of the United States as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan continues.
He feels that you're misinforming folks. And I think his answer to that would be, from the river to the sea, it means something different to him than it means to you.
Well, it doesn't mean something different. It's like people who said, when Hitler said the annihilation of the Jews, he really didn't mean it. He said that in a speech on January 30th, 1933. Rather, 1939. He said the annihilation of the Jews. I can only tell you, I believe what people say. I understand what Hamas says. And the example of what happened in southern Israel. Look, Sam, just condemn what Hamas did, will you? Just say that.
Here he says, I agree with from the river to the sea, but that doesn't mean death to Jews. It means one state solution for all religions equally.
All I can say to Sam is he and I both know that isn't true. The denial of the right of Israel to its independence, of Zionism as the national liberation of the Jewish people, is essentially the denial of Israel's right to exist. And frankly, I would not accept that at all. You talk about a one-state solution. Let me remind you that when Israel withdrew from Gaza, it offered to help the Palestinians in every way to create a livable operation in Gaza. And Hamas rejected that. They have waged a constant war, and their own people are suffering. So when Sam's willing to concede that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and what they did on October 7th was horrific, I'll be happy to continue the discussion. But you see, I don't think Sam's capable. Hey, Sam, are you capable? Are you capable of condemning what Hamas did? Are you willing to condemn people who behead and rape and murder? Are you willing to do that? I mean, that's Hamas's fault. And Sam, let me ask you additionally, do you blame Hamas for the fact that they built tunnels of concrete and steel using aid that was supposed to go to the Palestinian people, and which was used instead for this dastardly purpose? I don't think so.
For every atrocity you name, and this is what confuses people, I think. For everything you name, the folks on the other side of the argument can turn around and say, well, yes, but what about what Israel has done, and what about this and that and the other?
Israel doesn't rape, it doesn't behead. No, it's not a contradiction. It's like it. Look, I could use any example of through history where you can sort of flip the side. Sure. Israel doesn't rape. Israel doesn't behead. Israel has acknowledged Palestinian rights. Israel kept a peaceful border with Hamas until Hamas broke the agreement. Why should the victim be the one who's blamed? It's like saying because you wore suggestive clothing, a man should have the right to rape you. I mean, It's as ridiculous an argument as can be made, I think.
Yeah.
And Sam disagrees. It's okay. We can do it respectfully. And you
Right.
may recall on KGO, talking to people for almost 30 years, I did respectfully disagree, but we argued respectfully, which is what I'd like to do.
I completely agree. Let's turn it to domestic politics now and talk about this, what happened yesterday, this Trump rant. So at first, the judge wasn't going to let him speak at the end of the New York fraud trial. And then he said, all right, you got 5 minutes. And basically, after about 6 minutes, the judge has to step in, cut him off, tell the lawyers for Trump, you guys need to control your client. And it goes, it goes south. The whole thing goes south.
Are you surprised?
No,
That's Donald Trump.
And then there's a bomb threat. The judge receives a bomb threat. He said, we have a situation, Trump is Trump saying this. We have a situation where I am an innocent man. I am being persecuted by someone running for office. And I think you have to go outside of the bounds here, which is why he is doing what he's doing. Police were called to the courthouse. They had to check the judge's home. They checked everything after this bomb threat was called in, and the whole proceeding was recessed. But now the trial is over.
May I ask you a question? Did Donald Trump condemn the use of violence or the threat of violence? Of course not.
I don't think he ever
That's the
has.
problem.
No, never has.
And that's the problem. It has to be made clear. Donald Trump is a danger to American democracy. He's a danger to the nation. And it is not as if when you have 91 separate charges against you that you're completely innocent. He isn't. And what's sad is that we as a nation may have him on the ballot voting for president of the United States. Liz Cheney's book sums it up very well, Oath and Honor, and I commend it to everyone. I think it's one of the finest books I've read.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is a danger. And the fact that people don't get that, don't understand it, I can tell you, Kim, I'm going to make a date with you in 20 years. You and I will do this again. And the evidence will be so clear, so direct, that people will scratch their heads and say, how is it people didn't understand? I really believe that.
I don't know how people don't understand. He's basically told us, right? He's showing us every day who he is. How we don't get it, I'll never understand that.
And he's going to weaponize the Justice Department.
Yep.
You know what's crazy is he learned a lesson from Roy Cohn, who was Joe McCarthy's attorney. He said, if someone challenges you, Roy Cohn said, just accuse them of the same thing. So when Joe Biden accused Trump of trying to cripple democracy, what did Trump do? He turned around and said the same thing about Joe Biden. There is no moral equivalency here. Whatever you think of Joe Biden, you can agree with him, disagree with him, whatever it is. Joe Biden's not a threat to democracy. And the idea that Donald Trump has promulgated, that it is Joe Biden who is responsible for all his legal troubles, all the problems, civil and criminal, it's all because of Joe Biden. Well, if you believe that, I have a bridge I'd like to sell you. It's made out of gold, and it'll take you right to Petaluma to see Kim McAllister.
No, don't do that. So he's going crazy in court. The judge has to stop it. And
but he's a Democratic judge. Don't forget that.
He's a Democratic judge. He's also, by the way, because this isn't a jury trial, the judge that will decide how much Trump has to cough up, right, to pay for all the damages here.
Hey, so Kim, if I attack
the guy who's going to be the one who decides the matter.
If I attacked you and Nikki every single time I appeared on this program, how often would you invite me to be with you?
I mean, probably wouldn't have you back.
Thank you.
But no, thank you.
I wouldn't have Donald Trump back in the White House for anything. And I hope the American people are smart enough to see the danger. By the way, by the time we are together again next week, we'll know the results of the Iowa caucuses.
Right.
And it's very cold in Iowa, really cold.
I'm thinking that means more people might not turn out for the caucus.
Well, it's going to be a real challenge. And then we go into New Hampshire. And of course, Chris Christie has withdrawn as a candidate for president. I have to tell you, I was completely unimpressed by the two bickering nabobs of negativism, if I can use that expression from Spiro Agnew. it's tragic that the Republican Party is left with a choice of DeSantis or Haley, both of whom it was appalling what I saw. And Donald Trump, interestingly enough, because I watched Fox, the appearance he did on Fox for the 1 hour, Donald Trump sounded presidential. I don't agree with him on anything. I'd never vote for him. But if I had a choice between taking a copy or the original, I'd be taking Donald Trump. Of course, if I were voting in as a Republican, I'd be writing in Liz Cheney's name or Adam Kinzinger's name. But that's not the Republican Party of today.
Huge thank you to Stan Pollock, our favorite CPA, who says guests like John Rothmann make me very much want to support your show. Huge thank you to Stan. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and by the way, remember, when we were on KGO, we counted on commercials.
Right.
But here, this is crowdfunded.
Right.
So Nikki and her show and Mark Thompson and his show are completely crowdfunded. I, on the other hand, am not crowdfunded. No. I just do it every day for free.
What I like though about this show and about our viewers, listeners, is that they might not agree with everything we say, or they might agree with part of it or not with other parts of it, but they're here for the discussion. And that's the same as we were doing at KGO, about the discussion, considering other ideas. Well, here's what someone is saying. Well, here's what this person's view. Let's pick it apart and feel out how we think, or whether we think that's reasonable or why. And it's that back and forth and that discussion that continues here. And that's what I love about this show.
Of course.
Yeah. And what I loved about KGO as well.
Yeah. Well, I have said it before and I will say it again. We're the fourth largest media market in America, and there is no radio talk show station with interaction. It's just criminal. But okay, keep going, Kim. What else have you got for me?
There is a talk show. It's just a conservative talk show station.
But it's not really a talk show because there's no interaction.
No, it's all.
It is on KSFO. What you have are monologues by the type like Mark Levin and Sean Hannity, but they're not interactive. What makes radio live is when you can pick up the phone, call in, and raise holy heck. And
here we have it in the chat, which is not quite the same, but a little bit, And sometimes, by the way, I will put out the link for the day in the chat and have people chime in. So
that's great.
It kind of lives on that way. Yeah. Let's talk about the headline in this story from the Huffington Post says Trump is doubling down on his new election conspiracy theory for 2024. And that is what he says. And it's kind of along the lines of what we've already been discussing. He said, my legal issues, every one of them, the civil, the criminal, they are all set up by Joe Biden. He said, crooked Joe Biden. Every single just about case that I'm involved in was set up by Biden, and they're doing it for election interference. Now, I don't agree with any of that, but he says it over and over and over again. And we know that the more you say something, the more somebody hears it and believes it, right? And so I'm concerned that he's allowed to spread that lie, that he's allowed to say that Joe Biden is behind all these cases. And I don't know if there's anything we can do to make him stop.
All we can do is knock it down.
Yep.
These cases are coming in different jurisdictions, different sources. Some are civil, some are criminal. All are based on Donald Trump's own actions. And look, what do you do when you have someone like Trump? You just have to continue to refute the arguments, which is what I try to do on my podcast in part, and what I try to do when I appear with you or with Mark Thompson or with Nikki Medoro or with the Beowulf Rockland or with anybody who uses me on the air, and I'm interviewed by a lot of people. We just have to tell the truth. And I happen to believe something, and maybe I'm wrong. I hope to God I'm not. I think the American people are too smart to fall for this again.
I thought we were too smart to fall for it the first time. I mean, how can he be the leader in the polls? So obviously somebody's not smart.
He's the leader in the polls because of name recognition. But when push comes to shove and people go into the ballot box, I have to believe, and we saw it in 2016, he lost the popular vote overwhelmingly to Hillary Clinton. And he lost both the popular vote and the electoral vote in 2020. 9 million votes less than what Joe Biden got. I have to believe that people fundamentally understand. And we have to go through a de-Trumpism. The Republican Party has to.
Could we please go through a de-Trumpism, a surgical removal? Like the doctor, we looks like we got it all, ma'am. Looks like we got everything.
Yeah, but you know what? In order to defeat Donald Trump, his own supporters have to understand the pernicious, vile nature of what he's doing. And somebody said to me the other day, they said, I'm going to vote for Trump. And I said, explain to me why. Well, I don't like his personality, but I liked his policies. If you like Trump policies, vote for Nikki Haley, vote for Ron DeSantis, but don't vote for Donald Trump, because what goes along with the policies are the personalities. When Donald Trump says that he is going to weaponize the Justice Department, he's going to get his enemies, that should scare everyone. I worked for Richard Nixon. When Nixon tried to do that, the American people rose up and said no. And I think that's what has to happen with Trump. The real challenge, when we are no longer talking about all this, and hopefully when Trump is defeated, is what the Republican Party will do next. What is also interesting to me is fear. People in the Republican Party are afraid to alienate Trump voters. They know they can't win without Trump voters. So their comments about Donald Trump publicly are restrained. Privately,
Nikki
they
Haley
aren't.
doing it. Absolutely. She's tap dancing all around it. So, and here's the problem. Two things to tell you. First of all, another Trump quote that he says yesterday: every time someone sees me in court, remember Joe Biden and his thugs that surround him did it. So that's what his supporters are thinking. Every time you see him in court, Joe Biden's fault. That's what he thinks.
And it's not true, and it's a sad commentary.
But last time he lost an election, or even before, when he was laying the groundwork for election fraud before the election even happened, he was talking about voter fraud, right? So he always has someone to blame, which I think should be a red flag. Last time for election fraud, he blamed the voters, mail-in ballots, people, all these things that he said happened that judges and in cases in courts across America said, nope, didn't happen. Nope, that's not a valid reason. Nope. So that he blamed last time. And now it's Biden's fault. Now it's election interference from Joe Biden. So if there's always someone to blame, then shouldn't we wisen up over time, thinking if it's not always someone else's fault, if the common denominator is Trump?
If you belong to a cult, don't confuse people with the facts. I have argued facts relative to Donald Trump for years with people I respect, people who are listening to this program who disagree with me profoundly.
Yeah.
But the facts are clear. And I believe, because I believe in the American legal system, and I believe that although it makes mistakes, in the end, justice prevails. I think Donald Trump is in deep trouble, and he deserves it. It's not trouble created by Joe Biden. It's trouble created by Donald Trump. Yeah. And I can only hope that in the end, we understand that. We'll see what happens in the caucuses. I'm not as concerned about the Iowa caucus because it's not a barometer really of anything. And with the weather being what it is, it'll even be smaller. But New Hampshire, where people can vote who are not Republicans, there are some who can vote in the primary, that'll be very interesting. And let me tell you that the two issues that are really important now: can Nikki Haley win in her own home state of South Carolina? And the second one is, can Ron DeSantis win in his own home state of Florida? Because the polls are indicating that Donald Trump is going to win both of those states. Yeah. And may I point out as well, in one of the most disturbing things to me, the entire Republican leadership in the House of Representatives, all of them, have now endorsed Trump for president of the United States. I think Elise Stefanik, who was a great Trump critic and now is one of his great supporters, is angling for the vice presidential nomination. She's a woman. She is a Republican leader. She is from New York. I mean, there are a whole bunch of reasons why, if Trump is the nominee, he might turn to Elise Stefanik. And it's tragic. I have to tell you, one of the most interesting things about reading Liz Cheney's book, Oath and Honor, is her exposure about the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Johnson, who is an election denier, who supports Donald Trump, who tried to subvert the election of 2000.
Yeah.
How can that man be Speaker of the House of Representatives?
That's a
What
shocker.
does it say about the Republican Party? I mean, you know, I didn't like Kevin McCarthy particularly, but I'll tell you something. I would rather have had a Kevin McCarthy than this guy. And frankly, I would like to go back to the days when we had real leadership by Republicans in the House of Representatives, including Paul Ryan. You know, Paul Ryan was the Republican nominee for vice president of the United States on the ticket with Mitt Romney. Listen to what he's saying about Trump.
Yep.
You know, listen. I mean, that's the thing that disturbs me. I grew up in the Republican Party, and this is no longer the Republican Party. I hate to say it, but Donald Trump Jr. was right. He said it's not the Republican Party anymore. It's the Trump Party. Yep. And isn't that a sad commentary? If we have a two-party system in this country, which is what we are blessed with. Now, I was asked the other day about a third party. I don't believe a third party can be anything more or less than a spoiler. In order to be an effective third party, you have to do what the Republicans did when they were founded. They ran in House and Senate races. They ran in governorship races. They had a national base. You cannot create a third party from the top down. We've seen that repeatedly, whether it was Henry Wallace in 48 or George Wallace in 48 and in 68, or whether it was Ross Perot or, you know, whoever these people are who run. A political party has to be viable. And we saw in the case of Jesse Ventura, who was elected governor of Minnesota as an independent, the Democrats and the Republicans both opposed him. So if we're going to create a third party in this country, it has to be a party that's built from the bottom up, not from the top down. And I don't see that happening. So I was asked recently, what does a third party mean? First thing you have to know is it depends whether you can get on the ballot. A third party that isn't on the ballot has no impact at all. And one of the most interesting things is you've got the Green Party that's on the ballot in a variety of states, and we'll see who they nominate. I mean, it could make a huge difference. I don't know, except I do not count on a third party to accomplish anything.
Do you see any of the third party candidates in this presidential roundup that have any viability at all? Like, I know we have RFK, there's a Green Party candidate. Anybody stick out to you as being someone who could either unfortunately split the vote and allow Trump back in, or someone who might have a shot?
The real danger is from RFK Jr. Because he will take votes away from Donald Trump. Yeah. He's a conspiracy theorist and he buys into all that stuff. And it's his name. It has nothing to do with RFK Jr. It has to do with the fact that he's RFK's son. But I hope that a third party does not determine what happens. Remember what happened in 2000. We had two third party candidates on the ballot in Florida, Pat Buchanan, and we also had Ralph Nader. And their votes between them prevented Al Gore from carrying Florida.
Yeah,
and as a result, what you had was the victory of George W. Bush. Yeah. So I always think about it. A third party in this country, you need to have representatives in the House and the Senate and in governorships in order to be a viable third party. And by the way, I don't vote for a personality because personalities can go off the tracks. Just take a look at Donald Trump. What keeps Joe Biden steady is a Democratic leadership that is very solid. The Republicans are wimps, to be very honest with you. They won't stand up to Donald Trump. They're afraid. And if I were in political office, and I understand the first job of a politician is to get reelected, but I could never betray my conscience. Maybe that's why I've never stood for political office, because I've always tried to do the right thing. And I've always tried to be honest with people.
Let's move to DeSantis, who we mentioned briefly, but we'll talk about this case because yesterday, or rather Wednesday, an appellate court ruled that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis violated the First Amendment by suspending a prosecutor by the name of Andrew Warren for his own political gain. This was a decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, and they vacated a decision from a federal judge who claimed that he didn't have the power to reinstate Warren and directed the judge to reconsider his ruling. So the story is this, that DeSantis suspended Warren, who was in his second term, so he's duly elected, as a county state attorney, Hillsborough County state attorney. He cited Warren's policies that created the presumption that certain low-level offenses and cases over non-criminal bike and pedestrian violations would not be prosecuted. So this is part of a DeSantis thing to be tough on crime. So he takes this guy out of office. And the judge is now saying that the 11th Circuit is now saying, you didn't have the power to do that.
Well, that's the problem with Ron DeSantis. There are many things that he's done, including taking books off the shelves in libraries, creating havoc with the whole question of minority studies in Florida. Look, Ron DeSantis is going to go down to defeat in my judgment. It's going to be a dramatic defeat. I expect the next time I appear on the Nikki Medoro show, he will no longer be running for president if he loses as badly as we think he will. Although maybe he'll stick around and be defeated in other states. But what a tragedy that a Ron DeSantis can emerge with this kind of strength. By the way, do you know how much money he has spent? Millions of dollars. The last candidate for president to blow so many millions was John Connally of Texas, who in 1980 spent $11 million for one delegate. Wow. That's all he won, the most expensive delegate in the history of American politics.
Shouldn't your money be spent after you? I mean, you can't spend your whole wad before the real election. We're just we're in primary season right now. Doesn't it seem like maybe you should section it out a little bit and not just blow everything all at once?
Nope, because if you're not the nominee, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Before we move
on, don't you think they could have sent some of the money to the Nikki Medoro and the Mark Thompson show? For
they should have, as did Bengo Shaftesbury, who says $10 for every time John was wrong about Trump. He is in no way presidential. Did you ever say Trump was presidential? I don't think you said that.
Yes. Thank you. I said he sounded more presidential at the town hall on Fox than Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis did on CNN. That's a backhanded compliment.
We'll
and I concede it. And thank you for that. So send another $10, please.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you, I don't get a cut of the money. I want you to know that. But to keep these programs going, they need support. Go ahead.
Doug, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Brian says, thank you, John, for visiting us every Friday, and the happiest Sabbath to all in the best of health. So thank you, Brian. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Brian.
I appreciate the $18. Wow. Thank you very much. And then Pamela, John R., I learned so much from you and enjoy listening to your podcast. You are a treasure of a human. I agree with that. You are a treasure of a human.
Thank you very much. And may I point out, whether you agree or disagree, the idea is for people to hear and debate and discuss.
Right. Speaking of your podcast, it's called Around the Political World with John Rothmann. I'm looking for there it is. Around the Political World with John Rothmann. You can find it on you just do a search online, or are you on multiple podcast platforms?
I'm on multiple things. You go to Spotify, you go to Amazon. But if you just Google Around the Political World with John Rothmann, I'm there. And let me remind everybody, it's 10 minutes, Monday through Friday. That's all it is, 10 minutes. And I had somebody say, John, I'm glad you're 10 minutes. I don't have time in my day, so I listen to you commuting to work.
Oh, cool.
10 minutes. That's all I ask.
Have you done today's already?
Oh, yes.
What's it about?
The Hooties.
Oh, the Hooties. Okay.
Absolutely. Right. Because everybody should understand, and I point this out, Richard Nixon once observed to me that 70% of a president's time is devoted to foreign policy. Mm-hmm. We have not only the Middle East, which who knows where we'll be on Monday. I mean, really and truly. We have Ukraine, which nobody is paying any attention to, but which is a disaster. And if you saw how Russia has been firing missiles into Ukraine, it's just astounding. We have the situation with China, and they continue to threaten to invade Taiwan. Let me tell you, that happens, we've got real problems. So all of these issues are huge, and you want a president of the United States who can grapple with these problems. Right. And the one thing I noticed in the 2-hour Republican joint appearance, they spent hardly any time on this, but There is a difference between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Nikki Haley represents, if you will, the traditional Republican approach to being involved in the world. Ron DeSantis strikes me as being an isolationist, and that would be a terrible throwback. So, there is a dichotomy there. And the Republican Party now, I would remind you, is blocking aid to Israel, blocking aid to Ukraine over the question of our southern border. And the southern border is a real issue. We've talked about it for years. But denying money for Ukraine and Israel at this point is like cutting off your nose to spite your face. When Vladimir Putin says his next goal is Poland and the Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, we should believe him. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that.
When you talk about foreign policy, and I know I'm keeping you too long, and I need to let you go.
No, it's all right. My wife is in Florida. My kids are in Aspen. I'm all alone.
You're okay. One of the things that I think about when I think of Trump and foreign policy is how frightened I was seeing the messages that he was sending to the world last time, the pulling out of the climate agreement. And I was reading a couple of days ago that now the director or the president of the European Union at that time is coming out with a story about what happened when she was talking with Trump. And he told her, listen, if you're ever in trouble, our European allies are ever in trouble, we're not coming to help you. We're not coming to help you at all. He was angry about NATO money and that he felt other countries weren't paying their part or their fair share. And so he said, we're not coming to help you. And by the way, you owe me X gazillion dollars for not paying your part into NATO. And he said, we will not be part of NATO anymore. We will leave NATO. And if our European allies are ever in trouble, we won't come to your rescue. That's what
that should scare the American people, because
it scared her. And she said, this is what you're getting. And this is what we have to prepare for. And that is why she's now advocating for Europe to have all these weapons systems, because they can't count on the United States.
Yeah. Look, the United States is the backbone of freedom in this world, whatever mistakes we make. I always remember this, a little history. Dwight Eisenhower did not want to run for president. The leading Republican nominee was Robert A. Taft, Bob Taft of Ohio. And Bob Taft had dinner with Eisenhower. And he said to Ike, if I'm elected president, we're going to pull out of NATO. And Eisenhower said at that moment he decided to run for president. He didn't run because he wanted to be president. He ran because he wanted to stop the forces in the Republican Party led by Bob Taft, who would have withdrawn from NATO. The Republican Party, listening to what Donald Trump has said, should be standing up and saying, absolutely not. Remember, the leading Republican president in the mid-20th century was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the first commander of NATO. Ronald Reagan, the hero of most Republicans, at least once upon a time, was a staunch defender of NATO. There is such a disconnect. And I'll tell you what worries me. It does. People don't get it. I can define it. I can stand up, I can give a speech, or I can appear on a radio program, or I can appear with you, or Mark, or Beowulf, and I can say it over and over again. But are people listening? Do they understand the implications? And I hope people do. I want to see this country prosper. I want this country to be respected in the world. Donald Trump does not garner respect from people in the world. He's still talking about how wonderful Orban of Hungary is, and Orban is a brutal dictator. I mean, it's nuts. He still prefers Vladimir Putin as a leader because he's strong, or the president of China, President Xi. He's a strong man. Oh, let me tell you, what is strong is the strength of American ideas. And we have to understand that what Donald Trump advocates is the antithesis of everything we as Americans traditionally stand for. And may I say, as a former Republican, if all the Republican presidents and candidates for president gathered together in heaven and looked down, believe me, they would oppose Donald Trump with every ounce of vigor they have. I wish we could have that direct line to heaven for that purpose.
All right, last story. We'll end it on a hopeful note. This man's name is Robin Vos, and he gives me a little bit of hope that, there's still Republicans out there that are reasonable, that are moral, that care about America. He is under recall. He is the assembly speaker in Wisconsin, and he he he's a guy who resists Trump's big lie and his whole election conspiracy, right? And because of that, he's being there's an attempt to recall him. A group of election denying activists are trying to punish politicians like this man and other state officials who they say are insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump and his attempt, we know, to overturn the 2020 election. Voss has been a particular target because he's refused to accept their claims that the election was rigged. He says, no, it wasn't rigged. He's a reasonable, logical kind of fella. Might not agree with any of his politics, but at least he's got that going for him. But there's now a recall announcement by these conspiracy theory groups who don't want anyone to be in a political office that doesn't think like they think. Voss is calling it a waste of time. He said the effort is no surprise since the people involved can't seem to get over any election in which their preferred candidate doesn't win. So I guess the question is, when did we become a group? When did we become a country that couldn't tolerate when you lose? When your candidate loses, we don't take it in, take the hit on the chin anymore. We don't say, all right, well, we gave it a valiant effort and shake hands and walk away. Where's the good sportsmanship?
With Donald Trump, there is no good sportsmanship.
Yeah.
And the tragedy is, and maybe we should have a full discussion on what a cult is, but the people who support Donald Trump believe his lies. And it doesn't matter if you confront them with the truth, because if Donald Trump doesn't believe it, it isn't true.
Yep.
Isn't that a tragedy? And I really am horrified and terrified by people like that. Now, will Voss be recalled? I don't know what his district looks like. I don't know whether they'll have the votes to have him recalled. But look at all of the Republicans who chose to dissent. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, countless Republicans up and down the line.
They paid for it with their jobs.
That's right. And that's what Donald Trump threatens. All I can tell you is I look forward to the day when Donald Trump is not part of the political scene, and whether those who have been stupefied by Donald Trump will wake up and say, oh my God, what did we do? And thank God they have failed so far. And I view it as my job, my personal crusade. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Donald Trump never sits in the White House. But more than that, even though I'm no longer a Republican, to encourage Republicans with a conscience to speak out. And I will do everything I can to help them do that based on my own experiences. Look, may I just quickly add, I was devoted to Richard Nixon. I was a friend of Richard Nixon's. I traveled with him. I knew him well. And I tended to want to believe him because I believed in what Nixon stood for.
Right.
And Watergate was shattering for me. The whole situation of somebody who I respected and admired, and who, by the way, gave me every opportunity to be what I am today. I owe that to Dick Nixon. I'll never forget that, and I'll always be grateful to him. But that doesn't mean you abdicate personal principle. That doesn't mean when somebody does something wrong that you don't point it out and make it clear. And I just hope, really and truly, that the Republican Party wakes up and understands, and that those Americans who support him, I'm not talking about the QAnon people, the nuts and the kooks. I'm talking about mainstream Republicans.
Yeah.
And if I were a mainstream Republican, I'd be boosting Liz Cheney for president. But she could not even be renominated in Wyoming for her House seat. Adam Kinzinger was forced out of his House seat through redistricting. I really am upset.
These are the Republicans that Republicans should want in there. The reasonable, rational, logical people.
You're right. That's why I wonder if there could be a meeting of Republican leadership in heaven, what they would be saying. This is something that is not just about Republicans. It's about America, because we have a two-party system, whether you like it or not. And the alternative party has to be responsible. If somebody like Voss can be purged by Wisconsin Republicans simply because of his belief system,
Right.
and he's right. Imagine where that leaves us if that view were to dominate. So sanity is what we need. And may I point out, that is what you and Nikki and Mark and Beowulf Rothmann with his podcast and what I try to do with mine, that is what we are trying to do. Are we crying in the wilderness? I hope not.
Around the Political World with John Rothman. Hear it Monday through Friday. It's a 10-minute podcast, and it's a little dose of sanity for your day. Thank you, John Rothman, for being with me. I'm so lucky that we get to have you on Wednesdays on the Mark Thompson show and on Fridays here on the Nikki Medoro show. And it feels a little bit like I didn't lose so much when KGO went away.
And may I say, I appreciate the fact that you guys offer this forum and include me in it.
Yeah.
And everybody should know how valuable this is. And I will say it again, support the Nikki Medoro program, support the Mark Thompson program. Do it, well, because without them, where would we be?
Yep. Thank you, John Rothman. We'll see you next Friday. Bye.
Can't wait.
Thanks
Bye.
for coming by. Have a great weekend.
You
Bye.
too.
John Rothman, everybody. So glad to have him on the Nikki Medoro show. And yes, thenikkimedoroshow.com is our website. That's where the Patreon and the PayPal links can all be found. And of course, please click the thumbs up button. That's the free thing to do. The thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe as well. All right. How about a little bit of news here on the Nikki Medoro show? Let's get right to it and see if I can play the news sounder.
Now, from around the world to up your street, the Nikki Medoro Show presents News Czar Kim McAllister.
Yes, as John Rothman was mentioning, it's going to be a very chilly, the coldest on record Iowa caucuses. The caucus goers are expected to face frigid wind chills in the -20s as they head to and from their local precincts on Monday. That is because a massive winter storm is moving over that region. Weather conditions are presenting challenges for Republican candidates that are now scrambling to make their final pitches just days before the caucuses. So they're dealing with all this as well. The House will hold a vote on whether to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress next week. Republican Majority Leader Steve Scalise making the announcement today, saying the president's son is not above the law. Hunter Biden defied subpoenas to testify behind closed doors in the Republican-led impeachment inquiry into President Biden and only offered to testify publicly. They did not take him up on that. Former President Trump's civil fraud trial in New York is over. As we mentioned earlier, the trial concluded yesterday after more than 5 hours of closing arguments, including 5 minutes by former President Trump, until the judge pulled the plug on the former president. He has already found Trump guilty of falsely inflating the value of a dozen real estate holdings to get better bank loan rates. Now the judge will decide what exactly Trump will have to pay. President Biden says strikes from both the U.S. and the U.K. against the Houthi militants in Yemen are a direct response to continued attacks on ships in the Red Sea, as John Rothman mentioned earlier. The counterstrikes were carried out by both countries with support from Austria, Canada, and the Netherlands. Officials say the attacks hit more than a dozen targets in Yemen, including radar systems and drone storage as well. President Biden is announcing that federal student loan debt will be wiped clean for some who took out small loans. Those who got less than $12,000 in loans and have been paying them off for at least 10 years will see their remaining debt canceled immediately. The move announced today applies to those who are enrolled in the SAVE, S-A-V-E repayment plan, and will particularly help those who borrowed for community college and also low-income borrowers as well. The winter weather causing real trouble at our airports today. More than 1,800 flights within, into, or out of the United States have been canceled so far, according to FlightAware. Chicago airports have been severely impacted. A total of more than 1,000 flights have been canceled at O'Hare International Airport and Midway International Airport as well. Weather. The FAA is now going to increase oversight into Boeing's production. Friday's announcement comes just one day after the agency said it would be investigating the aircraft manufacturer after this door plug blew off an Alaska Airlines flight last week. Boeing's production line of the 737-9 MAX and its suppliers will be audited now by the FAA. And for football fans, the NFL playoffs kick off Saturday. The Cleveland Browns visiting the Texans in Houston for AFC's first Super Wild Card weekend game. In the nightcap, the Miami Dolphins will head to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs at Arrowhead, where temperatures are expected to be below 0 degrees. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the Nikki Medoro Show. All right, let's get right back into it. Some other stories to talk about today. The storing of snow. What you say? Yes, the storing of snow. Apparently, there's a shortage of snow at ski resorts because of climate change. The areas that used to get dumped with snow are now getting nothing. So instead of going out of business, ski resorts are having to either manufacture snow, or when snow falls, they rake it into these big piles, and then they put these I don't want to say tarps. It's kind of a tent of insulated mats is what it is. And then they spread it out again the following season. So they're trying to save the snow. I don't know about the quality of snow that has been sitting around under these protected insulated mats, but that's what they're doing. This is what's happening in Finland. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. My apologies. Hold on for just a minute. False alarm. No sneeze coming. Mm-mm. All right. So that is what's happening in Finland, where they have this resort that's opening in early October, and it's a guarantee that the World Cup ski races can go ahead in the month of November because they use this farmed snow to lay down a base layer on certain runs without needing to rely on Mother Nature to provide the snow. They don't have to operate snow cannons, which force out water and compressed air to fall as snow crystals. What they did is they just saved the snow they wanted to, and then they respread it out all over again. They said sometimes it's tough, the seasons aren't always excellent, and snow in winter arrives at different times. One day when winter starts, it's raining, but we don't need to worry about these types of conditions because we have a nice certain layer of snow already that they could fix. So this is the new way they're doing things in Finland because of climate change. And it seems, I don't know, I guess I'll say it's sad. I feel like it's sad that you have to rely on putting snow under tarps and then spreading it around again instead of opening your window one day and the snow has fallen and you're ready to rock and roll. But here's what it looks like. It's a whole different landscape too. So the view when you would be skiing in Finland would look more like this, where the snow is just on the trail and nowhere else. You're not skiing through a wintry wonderland. You're just skiing on the snow provided on the track, and that's it. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting statement on what's happening in the world and with climate change as well. I don't know if you saw this story. This Houston rapper is accused of holding this woman captive in his garage for years. Now, she says that she was panhandling one day and he stopped and said, "Do you need some help?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And so he took her home, and there she has remained chained up in his garage. Um, when police found her, she was in a padlocked garage, emaciated. The place was filthy, with snack wrappers everywhere on a dirty mattress. Like, think of the worst TV show you've seen, right? He says, We've had a consensual relationship all this time. She wasn't being held captive here." This is a Houston rapper. His name is Lee Carter. And apparently he goes by the name of Viper. Apparently he's a big deal in this genre of rap that he's works in, or that he provides music for. I haven't heard of him before, but he's now charged with aggravated kidnapping. This is because Houston police officers responded to his home after this woman managed to get a hold of his laptop and use an app on the laptop to dial 911, saying that she was being held against her will. So the police that arrived, they said they had to pry open this garage door. They discovered a makeshift toilet that didn't flush, mattresses covered with vomit, along with diapers and snack chips and Twinkies. The garage had a lock on the inside that needed a key to be opened. She was filthy, malnourished, weighed about 70 pounds. She told police she hadn't showered in 2 months and survived on chips and snacks. She, dialed 911 by using a texting app on his laptop. And he says, no, we had a consensual relationship and I'll provide witnesses that will say as such. So he's saying he's innocent of all this. He was released on $100,000 bail. And he's saying, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything and I'll be fully exonerated. But what an absolute nightmare. I tend to believe, I mean, unless she somehow managed to lock herself up in the condition in which she was found, there's something going on there. What a nightmare of a story. Another story I saw that I thought was interesting is Al Gore is leaving the board of Apple. And it's not because he doesn't believe in the company, it's because they have age rules and he's too old to serve on Apple's board now. He is Al Gore stepping down from Apple's board of directors. They have a long-standing policy that you can't stand for re-election on the board after reaching the age of 75. And so that means that Gore has to step down and retire from the board of Apple. He's served on this board since 2003. He received $376,000, a little more than that, compensation for serving on Apple's board of directors in 2003. 275,000 of that was stock options, or stock awards, I should say. Another man, James Bell, who is the former chief financial officer of the Boeing company, will step down from that board due to his age as well. But I think it's interesting how they have this age limit on the board, and I maybe it's because they want fresh blood in there and new ideas. I don't know, but it seems interesting that Apple has age limits and we don't for other reasons. For the presidency, there's no age limit, an age limit on the back end, but not on the other end, right? So yeah, Al Gore no longer on the board of Apple. There were, and we talked about this yesterday on the Nikki Medoro show, but always concerning, especially in the Bay Area, since a lot of us know people that work at Google. They've laid off hundreds of Bay Area workers. They even shut down, they had a child care center in Mountain View, and they're closing that down as well. They did it overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday. They let go of a few dozen Bay Area teachers at the child care area. They are closing this child care facility, laying off its 73 employees. They also laid off 364 people at the Mountain View offices and 266 at the Sunnyvale offices. And they said they are also taking away other perks, which I think they did recently. Food offerings, they took those away last year. They say they'll help parents that work at Google find other childcare alternatives. There were at least 300 enrollment spots in that Google school, and that's it. I just feel like we've seen layoff after layoff in the tech sector, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. These jobs are just being shed. Google's layoffs this time around, a few hundred each from several teams: design and services, knowledge and information products, core engineering. Those people are usually pretty safe. No. Google Assistant, 9 to 5 Google, the New York Times, and Semaphore first reported these layoffs, which potentially totaled more than 1,000 workers. So they say, Google, that they are responsibly investing in their company's biggest priorities and the significant opportunities ahead, and that teams across the company have been working to become more efficient. They say some teams are continuing to make these kinds of organizational changes, which include some role eliminations globally. But yeah, I just, for a company that has so much money, and continues to bring in so much money. It's surprising that they're just cutting like this. So to anybody affected by those layoffs, I'm sorry you lost your job. Yeah. Hate to see that. There's an Alphabet workers union. The Google is owned by the parent company Alphabet. I didn't know they had a union. They said, tonight Google began another round of needless layoffs. Our members and teammates work very hard every day to build great products for our users, and the company cannot continue to fire our coworkers while making billions every quarter. We won't stop fighting until our jobs are safe. I think it's a losing battle. I don't think you can do anything at this point. So, yeah, they laid people off last year. 12,000 employees in 2022, I should say 2 years ago, right? Um, and so here it continues. And I wonder what's going on in the tech world. If they're not making as much ad revenue, or why are feeling like they have to let workers go. I was reading one article that said it was overhiring. These companies, had too many staff members. There were too many people overlapping, doing what fewer workers needed to do. I don't know why you would do that, why you would overlap the hiring like that. I don't know. Huge thank you, though, to Louise Robinson. Did I get that right? Yeah, for the $10 super sticker. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who's contributed today. Really appreciate that as well. All right, let's move on to this avalanche that happened at Palisades Tahoe. So we know that the avalanche happened and that one person did not survive it, right? On the KT-22 run. I think I have a picture of that. But the very next day, another avalanche happened. So now we have 2 avalanches. Yeah, here's the mountain where it happened. So then we had a second avalanche. Pretty scary from what I understand. This avalanche happened yesterday, just one day after the one that killed a man that was from Point Reyes and injured 3 other people. It happened in the afternoon on the Alpine Meadows side of the mountain in an area known as Wolverine Bowl. And crews had been up there apparently trying to make things safe and clear out some snow. They said a report of an avalanche near Wolverine Bowl on the Alpine side was received at about 12:30 p.m. yesterday. Ski Patrol conducted avalanche hazard mitigation prior to opening that ski area, including shots from a 105 millimeter howitzer and ski cutting through the area. Upon receiving the report, the summit lift and the terrain was immediately closed. No reports of guests or employees impacted, but Ski Patrol conducted beacon, probe, and dog team searches just to make sure. After those searches were completed, it was confirmed no guests or employees were involved, and the area was cleared by Ski Patrol and the lift reopened. So, second avalanche. Got to be careful, really, when you're going up there. The crews were setting off explosions, which basically make man-made snow slides so that the areas are safe for skiing and snowboarding. And I don't think that was the cause of this particular avalanche, but who knows? Who knows? They say that the avalanche that happened on Wednesday, they call it incredibly difficult for that community. They're extending condolences to everyone who suffered and was traumatized due to that. And on this show, we saw the people basically digging out other people that had been buried in the snow. Really scary situation. We're getting more rain in the Bay Area, which means more snow in the Sierra. So if you're headed up that way, just be extra careful, because I don't think we've seen the end of this. Do you see the story about football for kids? This is a story we've talked a lot about here on the Nikki Medoro show, and how neither of us would let our children play football. But in California now, there is a tackle football ban proposed for California kids. And it's this renewed effort to get children under the age of 12 banned from playing football. Some parents are worried. They say if you do that, then you prevent the youngest players from developing foundational skills and these sports connections that can last a lifetime. But Um, I don't know. I feel like I agree with Kevin McCarthy, not McCarthy, McCarthy, who is an assemblyman, a Democrat, who is proposing this ban. He says, we've come to realize in the last few years, there's really no safe way to play tackle football. There's no safe blow to the head for a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. There just isn't. He is a huge 49ers fan. He's a huge NFL fan. When it comes to kids, though, he says we can't allow them to take these blows to the head. If his proposal or his bill passes, it's AB 734. California would become the first state to bar children under the age of 12 from playing tackle football. The goal, they say, is to prevent subconcussive helmet hits that could cause CTE in some of the 4 million kids that play tackle football across the state of California. CTE is detectable in the brains of amateur sports players, not just professional players. According to Dr. Stella Lagarda of the California Neurology Society, she says these repetitive head impacts, regardless of impact severity, lay the foundation for brain injury. This is at a point in our kids where the brains are still developing. And so the earlier you start participating in this kind of activity, the more at risk you put yourself. This is particularly relevant to me because I have a 9-year-old son who isn't particularly I don't want to say he's not athletic, but he's not a fast runner or what have you. He's a bigger kid and he wants to play football. And we've said no. So he's playing basketball right now. I mean, you could get hurt in any sport, right? You could get hit in the face with a baseball. But tackle football, I mean, there's the chances of you getting hit in the head pretty good, I would say. Good chance. So this assemblyman and others are pushing for the playing of flag football instead of tackle football and setting minimum age limits for other contact sports as well, like lacrosse, hockey, and soccer have already been put in place. Parents, though, that want their kids to play football, I guess ignoring CTE or just thinking about the now and not the future health of their children, are feeling government intervention doesn't belong on the gridiron. The choice, they say, of whether a child should be allowed to participate in a sport should come down to a child and their parents. That from the Sacramento County Sheriff, Jim Cooper. So what do you think? Do you think we should set a limit? Kids under the age of 12? Kids under the age of 14? Should we take high school football away or make it flag football instead? What do we do to keep our kids safe? I don't know. I mean, I understand that parents want to choose and they want to be the people that that are, in charge of their children's future. But people make decisions for weird reasons. So I don't know. Calvin says tackle football 14 and up. Everyone under 14 flag football. Jim writes, got a concussion from lacrosse and it was very serious. Jim, yikes. Jim also writes, one of my customers, their kid got a concussion. Yeah, very serious. It's true. Randy agrees with Calvin, says that works. My son did that, played flag up until 14, then played tackle in high school. I would argue, though, Randy, that even at 14, I have a 14-year-old daughter. I wouldn't want her head being repeatedly smashed. I don't necessarily know that that helmets are good enough to protect their heads and their brains are still developing. Oh, Vilma says, yeah, flag football until 14. Phineas writing that contact sports are dangerous. Rager says a limit on football. So it looks like overall you guys are supporting a limit on football for kids. Help the kids, says Mindy. Under 12, brain injury, need new better games to play. Yeah. I don't think she will either. She's more of a musician. She's a lover, not a fighter, that one. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Vilma. Liz says, my son played lacrosse in high school and it was terrifying. Oh, no. Ugh. So I think I support this bill. And I think also it's peer pressure. So when all of your friends are playing tackle football, you want to get in there and do it. But if everyone was limited to only playing flag football, that really takes the choice off the table. Makes everyone safe. Karen says it's about time someone did something about protecting kids. In Hawaii, football is the big sport, getting little kids involved. It's true. And Al says football rules and creates friendship. Played from 8 to 18, and it's fine. Brain injuries are much less likely at younger ages, not like the NFL. Well, Al Anonymous, I'm glad you had a good experience, but that's not what they're saying. This doctor is saying that the repeated hits to the head lay the groundwork for CTE and for other brain injuries later on. So I don't know. I don't want my son playing it. Not at all. And it's interesting because, he's the perfect candidate for it, but no, not even. All right. Well, let's lighten things up a little bit and bring on our friend Tim Sika to the show, who will talk to us about, let's see, I'm trying to get you up here, who will talk to us about movies. Yay, Tim Sika. Hey.
Hey, Kim, how are you doing? The Kim McAllister show today.
Oh.
I like it. I love it.
Way through. It's never as fun without Nikki, but we got to keep the show rolling and keep it going. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Right.
being here, even though Nikki is not. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
One of the movies that you wanted to talk about today, my daughter has already purchased tickets for. They pre-selling them. This is the movie Mean Girls. And is it the movie or is it the musical? Why did we need to remake this one, Tim Sika?
Well, before I talk about this new Mean Girls, I can't. Now, have you seen the 2004 Mean Girls?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, then maybe you can answer a couple of these trivia questions, because they put me through this too, and I want to see if you you know the answers to these. Okay.
Try.
What day is Mean Girls Day?
Oh, I don't know the answer.
October 3rd. I got that one wrong too. Okay.
Okay.
What is the name of the clique Regina George is head of?
So I might be getting my movies confused because Mean Girls was the Lindsay Lohan movies, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
So because I get them confused with Heathers. So at Heathers and Mean Girls, I always get them mixed up.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, anyway, the answer is the Plastics. That's the one I remembered.
Yes,
yeah,
the Plastics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and there's one more here. What is the name of the book the Plastics write in?
The Burn Book.
You got it. See, you got one right. I got one right, but I didn't get the first one right. Yeah, before the movie, they showed this like little teaser thing with Tina Fey and everything, and they were asking, they were doing this quiz, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna ask Kim this quiz tomorrow when I review it. Anyway, okay, so
I'm glad you did. I'm sad that I didn't get the Plastics right. I wouldn't have known the date, so I didn't do as well as I ought to have done, but that's all right.
Yeah, no, you did pretty good. You got, 33% correct, like me. Anyway. Okay, so here, 20 years after Mean Girls this is the movie version of the Broadway musical of the same name based on the 2004 movie. Okay. That's clear. Okay, screenplays by Tina Fey. She wrote the original screenplay too, which in turn was based on Rosalind Wiseman's 2002 book, Queen Bees and Wannabes. It was a big New York Times bestseller, that book. Anyway, and like The Color Purple, at least from the preview trailers, they don't really want you to know that this is a musical, but it is. I mean, I think there's like 17 musical numbers in all by my count anyway. And musical version of the Mean Girls, 2004 Mean Girls, which is about this naive high school girl who was homeschooled, and her mother decides that it's sort of time for her to start mingling with other girls her age in an academic setting. So she, enrolls the daughter in high school, and the girl sets out to kind of navigate her way through the social hierarchy of a modern American high school. So it's about all the things you would think a high school musical is about: popularity, the cool kids, the different cliques, in particular the Plastics, which is this elite, quote unquote, group of girls. headed by this, there's no getting around this, but she's a bitch. Her
Yeah.
name is Regina George. Yeah, she's a bitch. I was trying to figure out a way to say that. No, but
No.
she was a total bitch. And she's very nicely played here by Regina Rapp, who reprises her Broadway role. I didn't know the Broadway musical. I tend to shut out a lot of these newer, although this is a 20-year-old musical. Anyway, I'll get to that. But this is a typical modern day musical where, at least in terms of movies, the sound mix is variable. Only like 50% of the lyrics are intelligible. And most of them are dwarfed by the orchestrations. I don't know why this keeps happening, but anyway, it's one of my pet peeves. And the songs themselves, both the music and the lyrics sound like everything else written for a Broadway musical since 1995.
Yeah.
And, the story gets a bit repetitive in the last third. And what did they say? That there's an adjective that one of the girls always uses, fetch.
Yeah.
She says
That's
something
so
is
fetch.
fetch. Well,
Yeah.
this movie is not as fetch as it thinks it is. but it does have, I have to admit, it has a peppy energy to it. There are some funny moments. The cast is excellent. The musical numbers are nicely staged and filmed. And the message, to high schoolers about really the ridiculousness of cliques and not being fake, I think, is beyond important. I think, in fact, in my opinion, I think cliques of any kind should be discouraged by teachers and faculty, but that's another conversation. Anyway, so on these bases, Mean Girls gets a recommendation from me. It's a qualified one, but it's a recommendation nevertheless. Yeah. And, I saw it at a preview, and there was an invited audience, and they really dug it. I mean, the humor was kind of fast and furious, and the lines were like so fast, if you blinked or you just, moved for a second, you missed it. And this crowd was so attuned to the movie, they were probably big fans of the original one, that they laughed at things or caught things that I'm going, oh, I missed that. I'm glad I'm seeing it with this audience. Anyway, I think this is going to be a big audience picture, and I think audiences are going to go for it. So anyway, and there's also a really funny musical number called Apex Predator. about Regina George, the narcissist, which is really, really funny. And the actress who plays her mom, I think, what's her name? Bussy Phillips plays Regina's mom. She is hilarious. I think it's worth seeing just for those two things alone. So yeah, I recommend it. Yeah.
So the Mean Girls musical has been around for a while.
Yeah, 20 years apparently. Yeah. Yeah.
And so all the theater kids, of which my daughter is one, are going together to see this Mean Girls musical.
Oh, they're going to have a blast. They did
Heathers a year or so ago. They did Heathers, and they haven't done Mean Girls at this community theater where we live yet.
Oh, you mean the community theater did Heathers? That's what you're saying.
The community theater did it's kind of it's called a young repertory theater.
Yeah.
So they did Heathers, and my daughter was in Heathers, but they haven't done Mean Girls yet. So they're excited to go see this musical on the big screen. One of that Apex Predator number is because in the original movie, Lindsay Lohan, remember her family, her parents were like hippie do-gooder people, and they had been missionaries in Africa, right? And they had moved back to the States from Africa, and that's why she ends up going to high school. But as a mother of a 14-year-old girl who this is her first year at high school, it's not too far off as far as trying to find your place, trying to fit in, trying to make friends, trying to figure out how you work within this whole high school hierarchy thing. That's the way it is, and it's,
I know.
A caricature of that. And I know it's kind of everything is intensified, but under the surface, that's the way it is.
Yeah. And that's what a caricature does, is it kind of like, it makes fun of it, it pushes it to the limit. And it's very tongue-in-cheek that way too. It sort of knows it's being a little over the top, but that's just what makes it funny, I think. Yeah.
And friendship problems and trying to figure everything out.
Oh, and boy jealousies, with the cute guy and everybody, all the girls wanting him. It's very truthful in that respect. Yeah.
So Mean Girls gets your recommendation. I like it.
Yeah. Okay. I think your daughter's gonna love it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's made for gals like her, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to I have it in a different language, but it's called The Teacher's Lounge.
Yeah. Okay. So everything I think I'm going to say about this movie
Is
may
this the
make
right
it.
poster? Do I have the
Yeah,
right
yeah,
poster?
that's the right
Okay.
poster. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Everything I say may make it sound like, well, who wants to see that? But
Mhm.
bear with me and keep listening, folks. This is a German film
Okay.
in English subtitles. It's also a huge critical darling, but okay, usually when people hear that, they go, oh, okay, so it's like an art film. But I also want to say that as a drama, it is very riveting and highly entertaining. It grabs you by the throat and it never really lets you go.
Oh.
It's the German entry for this year's Best International Feature at the 96th Academy Awards.
Mhm.
And I think the National Board of Review did name it as one of the top international films of 2023. So yeah, okay, The Teacher's Lounge. It's a drama about this idealistic 6th grade math teacher. She's in the poster there, played by what's her name? Leonie Benish, I think. I didn't know this actress. I've never seen her before, but she's excellent in this movie. She plays this idealistic 6th grade math teacher who tries to get to the bottom of a series of thefts at her school. That's the premise.
Okay.
And yeah, like I say, this is not only an entertaining, absorbing drama, but it's a really interesting study of human behavior, in particular here played out by teachers in a school. And that behavior, in my experience anyway, with the school and the faculty as a backdrop, it tends to have a particular quality. I don't know if that's the right word, a particular characteristic that's very peculiar to academic circles. And it's all played out here under the microcosm of the Teacher's Lounge, which is the name of the movie. There's a line in the film, what happens in the Teacher's Lounge stays in the Teacher's Lounge. Well, that's not always the case. And perhaps this is a generalization on my part, but in my experience anyway, there's a certain, with academic faculties, like we're on our own island, kind of, they have a philosophy, and we can basically do what we want amongst each other. And I think this attitude, this mentality gives a lot of people a lot of power that, in my opinion, they shouldn't have. In other words, you don't often see a lot of wisdom in a lot of academics. They know a lot about what they teach, but that's a far cry from actual wisdom. And school faculties always reminded me of the Vatican. You know, they have their own set of rules and they can virtually act unchecked. I don't know if any of this was meant to be in the movie, but I love how the film captured what it is I'm finding difficulty putting into words right now. And yeah, as I said, it's a riveting, very entertaining movie. In addition to being about something, you know, it goes into how the rumor mill starts,
Yeah.
you know, how gossip just tends to, I mean, obscure, you know, well, what's the truth here? What is going on? It dramatizes errors in judgment, all operating under this pressure cooker of the movie's title. There's lots to unpack in this movie should you choose to go there. But if you just want an entertaining drama, there's that as well here in spades. So this is just a good movie. I recommend people check it out, even if you're prone not to, and if you don't like foreign films and you tend to think, oh, it's a critical darling, I don't know if I really want to spend my time on it. It's worthwhile. There's a lot in it I think most people will be able to relate to. I saw a lot of myself in this movie, which anyway, that's another story which we'll leave for another time.
So Calvin says it's a math teacher turned private detective.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the ramifications of that, because she's very, the character that she plays is very idealistic and you're kind of on her side. But as you're watching her do these things, you're going, I don't know.
Might not have gone that far. Yeah.
It may not. Yeah. So it's fascinating. It's really fast. As a matter of fact, it's rare when I can say this, but when I put the movie on to watch it, you know, you go, okay, I got to watch this movie. within the first 5 minutes, it grabs you, and then you lose track of the time, and before you know it, it's over. It's that
Oh,
kind of movie.
wow.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
that kind of drama. Yeah.
Is this in the theaters only, or where can we see this?
Right now, it opens in Bay Area theaters today, just in theaters only. But you never know how quickly it's going to be available on VOD or streaming. Yeah.
Let us move to the next one. This is The Beekeeper.
Yeah. Oh, The Beekeeper. It's too bad Nikki's away today, because I have a feeling this one would go to the top of her must-see this week list. I just have a feeling. For one, it stars Jason Statham, right? And for another, it's ultra violent in the way in which I think she enjoys that kind of movie.
Yeah,
But
I don't
be that
enjoy
as
that
it
kind
may.
of movie.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I tend
Were you
to.
into it? Did you like it?
Well, I'm gonna explain. I kind
Okay.
of, yeah, I was, and I don't know what that says about me. But anyway, okay. This movie stars Jason Statham as this kind of, he's a kind of like devil angel. He's this guy. His name is Adam Clay. He's a former law enforcer, a sort of operative for some secret organization. Who, if you were ever in trouble, you would so want this guy to be on your side, right? I mean, if you were so in trouble. But anyway, he's since retired, and he's retired to being a beekeeper, to keeping bees on this property owned by this elderly woman, who more or less watches over him in a kind of paternal fashion. So
That
they
sounds
yeah,
peaceful.
it is. It's very peaceful and it's very sweet. And that's about all I should say about the plot. But I probably should also say that this is an intense revenge tale and an action thriller predicated on the internet scamming of the elderly. It's ultra violent, and for me, takes the violent action thriller genre to a whole new level of action and violence. I think, and it's an extremely well done picture and extremely good for what it does, what it is, and what it sets out to do. But it's also a morally questionable movie in that you're kind of rooting. Really, you're rooting for the vigilante who usurps the law to exact revenge in some of the most ultra-violent ways you can think of. And of course, the script rationalizes this by implying that he has no other recourse, because these elderly folks who are being preyed upon and stolen from are not really being protected by the law. At one point in the movie, I think one of the characters says to Statham, we have the law for this, so you really need to stop what you're doing. And his reply was something like, and when the law fails, you have me. And, which side are you really on, the law or justice? So it brings up these questions about justice and the law, how our laws sometimes, I mean, we need our laws, of course, but how they sometimes fail us. I suspect, I just thought of this was watching the movie, that maybe this movie may have been made on some level in response to how Trump's legal team is so manipulating the law to the point where you wonder if justice is ever going to be served, right? Yeah. So maybe I'm going crazy, and my colleagues going forward may look at me askance, because I found this movie very, very impactful. It makes you think about how human and corporate corruption spill over into everything else. I mean, even to the most humanitarian of efforts. I mean, for example, in the movie, it turns out that the FBI just happens to be using software in order to, find their guy, manufactured by the criminal organization that is scamming the elderly. So, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking this movie, because it's just, I think it's primarily an action revenge thriller that's meant to knock you out. But maybe I'm seeing things here that are just things I'm seeing. But I'm recommending it for all these reasons. But I'm just beware of those who are listening. If you have a distaste for ultra violence, you may want to think twice. This is one of the most violent films I have ever seen in my life.
And that's saying something.
Yeah. Now, and in IMAX, I saw this movie in IMAX. I mean, come on! At the end of the movie, my stomach was in knots, because you've got the IMAX size, and you've got the sound, and you've got, oh my God, it was intense. But for all the reasons that I mentioned, I'm recommending it. I don't know, maybe.
But it says something, though, that despite the violence, it still is an action thriller kind of movie that made you think. And how often does that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rarely if ever.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that, what was the one, there's that franchise. This may turn into a franchise too, because
John Wick or whatever.
Not John Wick, the one with Denzel Washington, the Exterminator or something.
The Bone Keeper, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Exterminator. I can't remember.
I think you're right. I think it was the Exterminator. Yeah.
Yeah, there were 3 movies made, and those movies are just violent movies. And you go away thinking, man, that guy was one of the best, killers for hire you'd ever want to hire to kill anybody. But this movie actually did make me think of what's going on in the world right now, about the imperfect quality of our laws. I mean, we need those laws, but I don't know, maybe we need to revisit the laws and make them more ironclad. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it made me question things, and I love it when movies do that.
I like that too. I don't know if I could sit through the violence, but I do like that. So I don't know.
Well, Nikki, if you're listening, or if you're going to listen later, you need to see this movie. I think, I know you'll want to see this movie.
So The Beekeeper, you say, despite its extreme violence, you're going to recommend that one because it made you think and the story was good.
Yeah.
The Teacher's Lounge in German, you loved it. You say it's in theaters now, and it's one of those movies where you start it and all of a sudden it's over and you don't realize the time has passed. So you liked it. And then, despite its problems, you're recommending Mean Girls. So we have all 3 movies you're recommending today.
Yeah. You should. If I ever need a press agent, I'm going to hire you.
I'll take that job. Trust me.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Tim Sika, I love you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sitting all through these movies and giving us a kickstart to the weekend so we know what to watch.
You bet, Nikki. Nikki. I'm Kim.
Whichever one.
Yeah, Kim. No, really. Thank you for having me on. I always love talking movies with you.
Absolutely.
We'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too, Kim. Bye.
Bye, Tim Sika.
Bye.
Tim Sika, everybody. I love it when he comes on the show. He's always I love the way he approaches movies with such thoughtfulness. So thanks to Tim Sika for being here today. And some thank yous I have to share with you as well. We'll start at the beginning where Stan Pollock, the CPA, rushed in with a $10 super sticker. Thank you so much for supporting the Nikki Medoro show. Also, Bongo Shaftesbury for a $10 super sticker. Thank you for that and for the comment as well. Doug with a $5 super sticker. Brian with an $18 super sticker as well. Thank you for the nice comment. We appreciate your all your participation today as well. Loved your comments. Pamela, thank you for the $5 super sticker and for giving John Rothmann some love. We appreciate that. And then Louise for a $10 super sticker. You are very appreciated. You can find us at thenikkimedoroshow.com. The Patreon and the PayPal links are there, and that is a huge, huge way to support the show, and it really benefits us. If you are here and have not yet click the like button or subscribed, please do that. That is a free way to help us. And if you liked anything today, please feel free to share that on social media as we try to keep the show growing as well and have it be a healthy, thriving show that we can continue to do. Thank you for being here. Next, we have the John Rothmann show. No, we already did that. We have the Mark Thompson show coming up next, and it's going to be a really good one. We'll talk to Michael Schur about politics. We'll do Friday Fabulous Florida with John Daly, and then Michael Snyder comes in with movie reviews as well. The Mark Thompson show next, followed by the After Party Live. That is all happening here on YouTube. For now, though, we will say goodbye with my boy, Jacob.
Nikki, you're all so awesome. Miss Brown, like a beautiful blossom. You're also the best. I really can't rest. You're all so awesome.
Wow. Okay.
Nikki, you're all so awesome.